Note, in the Revolutionary War period, Charleston, South Carolina was called Charlestown. It was mentioned in conversations, on maps, and in general usage. Therefore, this video will refer to it as Charlestown. By late 1779, two major British strategic efforts against the colonies' war for independence had failed. General George Washington constantly harassed the British and shadowed their every move, but generally avoided open battle unless it was absolutely necessary. In the northern colonies, it was a stalemate, with neither side able to wholly defeat the other. An army invading from Quebec under General Burgoyne had surrendered to the Americans under General Gates at the Battle of Saratoga, which inspired both France and Spain to declare war on Great Britain in support of the Americans. Meanwhile, a strategic effort led by Sir William Howe to capture the revolutionary capital of Philadelphia had met with limited success. In March 1778, following the defeat of a British army at Saratoga and the consequent entry of France into the American Revolutionary War as an American ally, Lord George Germain, the British Secretary of State for the Colonies, wrote to General Sir Henry Clinton that capturing the southern colonies was considered by the King as an object of great importance in the scale of the war. Germain's instructions to Clinton were that he should abandon Philadelphia and then embark upon operations to recover Georgia and the Carolinas, while making diversionary attacks against Virginia and Maryland. The Southern strategy was based on these facts. There was a stalemate in the northern colonies. Philadelphia was a limited success, but with the Continental Army shadowing them, it could not be held. Since the North was to be occupied, but not finally overcome in the near future. Then the reports of loyal Southerners seemed a promising prospect to General Clinton, and he wanted to pursue this strategy. Where, then, should the British strike in the South? Almost a year before, British forces had captured Savannah, Georgia. They were able to repulse an assault by a combined Franco-American force in October 1779. If they captured Charlestown, South Carolina, then they could use the city as a base for further operations in the southern colonies. In December, the day after Christmas 1779, Clinton and his second-in-command, Charles Cornwallis, sailed southward with 8,500 troops and 5,000 sailors on 90 troop ships and 14 warships. After a very stormy voyage, the fleet anchored in the Savannah River on February 1, 1780. Cutting the city off from relief, Clinton began a siege on April 1st. In order to consolidate British control of the immediate area, Clinton dispatched Banastre Tarleton and Patrick Ferguson to capture Monk's Corner on April 14th. On April 18th, 2,500 British reinforcements arrived. Charlestown was completely surrounded by the British. The opposing forces. On the British side, 12,847 regulars and militia, 4,500 sailors, 6 ships of the line, 8 frigates, 4 armed galleys, and 90 transports. On the Continental side, 6,577 regular sailors and militia, 3 frigates, 5 sloops, 1 schooner, 1 brig, and 3 armed galleys. British Commander-in-Chief for North America General Sir Henry Clinton, who had risen to his command after General Howe resigned after the Philadelphia retreat. He had been in America for almost 5 years, having first been deployed to Boston in 1775. Clinton's second-in-command, the experienced and capable Lieutenant General Charles Cornwallis. Major General Benjamin Lincoln led the Continental Army in Charlestown. He had been slowly gaining experience as a field commander of militia with George Washington's army in the north. This wasn't the first time that he had fought General Cornwallis. In 1777, at the Battle of Bound Brook in New Jersey, he had been surprised and was nearly captured by Cornwallis's troops. Every army and navy has its strengths and weaknesses. The British had an extremely powerful navy in the Revolutionary War period. They also had a small, very professional army that used the navy to go anywhere in the world. Whenever the British wanted to attack a coastline, they had many advantages. When King George III declared the colonies in rebellion, the British army expanded to meet this threat. 30,000 Hessians, which were professional German soldiers who served as auxiliaries, were hired to assist. One of the British Army's weaknesses was when it was far from a coastal supply point in the backwoods. It simply could not defend everywhere. What was realized by both sides was that when the British moved inland away from the coastal ports, their supply lines became extended and subject to raids and harassment by the American guerrillas. This was not initially perfectly understood at first by the Continental Army, so when the British decided to implement their southern strategy, the Continental Army, led by Major General Lincoln, decided to defend Charlestown. Was that the correct decision? Should the Continentals have retreated? George Washington was new at commanding and learned a lesson the hard way at the Battle of Long Island in August 1776. He was prepared to defend against the British on an island in a set-piece fashion, using untrained troops against a professional army and massive navy. He was easily routed and outmaneuvered by the British. He learned to pick and choose his battles and fight on his terms, not the enemy's. The Continental Army decided to throw everything they had into the defense of Charlestown, even though they were at a disadvantage in every way. They had untrained troops, a small navy, and the British could outmaneuver them. And that is exactly what happened. The British surrounded and then crushed them. If the Continentals had pulled back and adopted the same type of strategy as General Washington was employing, or as Nathaniel Greene would soon employ, then they would have been much more successful. The results of the battle were that the British captured over 5,200 prisoners and over 300 artillery pieces, plus assorted artillery rounds, muskets, ammunition, regimental colors, 49 ships, and 120 boats, plus tons of flour, large magazines of rum, rice, and indigo. The British were confident that there would be a Loyalist uprising that never really appeared. Also, Clinton left for New York to defend against possible Franco-Spanish aggression. The destruction of the Southern Continental Army truly left a void that the British were able to exploit. By October 1780, the Continental Army had suffered several devastating defeats in the South under the command of Benjamin Lincoln and Horatio Gates, leaving the Patriot cause at a major disadvantage in the Southern theater of the war. As it played out, the disaster in the South led Washington to send his best general, Nathaniel Greene, and appointed him as the commander of the Southern Department of the Continental Army. By this time, the British were in control of key portions of Georgia and South Carolina, and the governments of the southern states were unable to provide much support to the Continental Army. Greene would face a 6,000-man British army led by General Cornwallis and cavalry commander Banastre Tarleton, as well as numerous Loyalist militias that worked with the British. Greene was exactly the right man at the right time and at the right place. He knew exactly what to do. Outnumbered and undersupplied, Greene settled on a strategy of guerrilla warfare rather than pitched battles in order to prevent the advance of the British into North Carolina and Virginia. If the Continental Army had retreated, then most likely General Lincoln would have remained in charge. The British would have kept to the coastal areas and found a new area to attack. However, one thing is for sure, it was only in the absence of any real opposition that Cornwallis felt strong enough to go around chasing the elusive American backwoods guerrillas under General Greene. If he hadn't have done that, then he probably wouldn't have ended up at the trap at Yorktown, which effectively ended the Revolutionary War. So, it is tempting to say that they should have retreated from Charlestown, but looking back with 20/20 hindsight, as Doc Brown would say, it would have set in motion a course of events with unpredictable consequences. But I am glad to have pondered these thoughts with you. If you liked what you see, hit the subscribe button or share. Thank you. This has been EmersusTech.